Have you ever agreed to do something you really, really didn't want to do and walked away with this weird pit in your stomach? Or, okay, picture this. You have a boss who promises you a huge promotion, only to look you dead in the eye 3 months later and say they never said those words. It leaves you dizzy, right? You're completely second-guessing your own memory, literally thinking to yourself, wait, was I manipulated? Look, if you're nodding along right now, you are definitely not alone. We influence each other every single day. Sometimes it's totally honest persuasion, but other times it crosses this invisible line straight into manipulation. And man, the emotional toll of those encounters can stick with us for years, literally making us question our own sanity. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking the architecture of influence and diving deep into what people often call dark psychology. Now, understanding these tactics isn't just interesting, it's an absolutely crucial life skill. It's basically your ultimate defense mechanism for protecting your reality, your career, and your personal relationships. So let's just dive right in. We're going to uncover the everyday mind tricks people use, how they actually work on a clinical level, why your perfectly healthy brain is so vulnerable to them, and most importantly, how you can build a mental shield to protect yourself moving forward. Section 1. Demystifying Dark Psychology. Let's clear the air right away about what this actually means, because there is a ton of fear and honestly misinformation out there. Hollywood and pop culture have kind of convinced us that dark psychology is like magic or literal mind control, giving people supernatural powers over us. No way. That's a complete myth. The reality is way more grounded and, frankly, a lot more common. Dark psychology is really just the use of normal psychological principles, but applied in unethical ways. Think about a basic human drive, like our natural desire for reciprocity. If someone buys you a coffee, you naturally want to return the favor, right? That's just normal psychology. But if someone strategically buys you a cheap gift purely to aggressively guilt trip you into doing a massive unreasonable favor later on, boom, that is a psychological principle being weaponized. It's the standard mechanics of the human mind, just operating without a moral compass. Section 2, the anatomy of gaslighting. Imagine you tell someone, hey, you promised to call me yesterday, and they look right back at you, completely unfazed, and go, I never said that. You're making things up again. Now, hearing that once is weird, but hearing it repeatedly, it is incredibly unsettling. Gaslighting is a specific form of psychological manipulation where a person repeatedly causes someone to doubt their own memory, perception, or even their judgment. It is not just about winning a petty argument. It's about fundamentally altering your grip on reality. Because think about it. By constantly challenging your perception, the manipulator gains profound control. A person who can't trust their own mind becomes completely dependent on the person feeding them their version of the truth. So the really crucial point here is how this actually plays out over time. It almost never happens all at once. It's a slow, insidious process. Let's look at a typical timeline. Step 1 might happen in, say, week 1 of a new relationship or a new job. It starts with small, dismissive statements. You bring up a concern and they casually brush it off with, oh, you're just being too sensitive, or you're taking that totally out of context. It feels minor, right? But then we hit step 2, maybe around month 2. This is the confident denial. A major event happens and they assertively state, that never happened. And they say it with such unwavering conviction that it literally stops you in your tracks. By month 6, we reach step 3, the devastating result. Repeated over weeks or months, these interactions cause this slow, steady weakening of confidence in your own thoughts. You stop trusting your gut. It's this gradual erosion of your reality until you're completely reliant on their narrative. Section 3, why our brains fall. Which brings us to a really fascinating question. Why do smart, highly capable people get caught in this specific psychological web? Well, the answer lies in the fundamental way we process information. See, our brains naturally want consistency. We are hardwired to make sense of the world and to trust the people close to us. So when someone confidently denies our lived experience again and again, it triggers what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. This is the extreme mental discomfort of holding two totally conflicting beliefs at the same time. Basically, I know what I saw versus this person I trust deeply says I didn't see it. The psychological agony of this dissonance is immense. To resolve that profoundly uncomfortable feeling, our brains often just take the path of least resistance. We actually begin questioning ourselves instead of them. Because honestly, blaming our own memory is emotionally easier than accepting that someone we care about is systematically manipulating us. Now, let's pause for a second and make a very important distinction here, because we definitely shouldn't be misdiagnosing every single argument. A single disagreement, or, a forgotten event, is not automatically gaslighting. A genuine disagreement is just an isolated incident where people remember things differently. Maybe your partner genuinely thought you said you'd pick up the milk, and you genuinely thought they were going to do it. That's just life. Gaslighting, however, is a consistent pattern of twisting reality to make you doubt yourself or to avoid taking responsibility for toxic behavior. The absolute keyword here is pattern. If it's a one-off mistake, it's just a memory lapse. But if it's a calculated, repetitive strategy to keep you off balance at work or in a friendship or relationship, yeah, you are dealing with manipulation. Section 4, Defending Against Manipulation. Okay, it's time to empower ourselves. Let's walk through some actionable defense strategies to build your mental shield. First on the list, trust patterns, not isolated moments. Like we just talked about, recognizing that trend of behavior over time is your critical first step. If someone consistently makes you feel confused about your reality, that is a massive red flag. Second, write down important conversations. If you feel like your reality is slipping, literally just start a private digital note on your phone. Jot down dates, times, and the exact phrasing of promises or conflicts right after they happen. Third, talk with people you trust. Gaslighting relies heavily on isolating you. By bringing in a trusted third party like a friend, a therapist, maybe a different coworker, you get an objective outside perspective that breaks the manipulator's monopoly on your reality. And finally, don't ignore your instincts. If a situation consistently feels off, honor your gut feeling, no matter how confident the other person sounds. And this actually brilliantly illustrates the exact mindset you need to adopt to stay grounded. Your memory isn't perfect, but neither is theirs. It's completely okay to admit you might forget things sometimes. I mean, we're all human, but you should never, ever automatically surrender your reality, your lived experience, or your inner truth simply because a manipulator refuses to budge. You have a fundamental right to stand your ground and trust your own mind. We've seen exactly how gaslighting works to make you doubt yourself, and we've built a solid toolkit to fight back. But I want to leave you with a final, pretty provocative thought based on the very next tactic we're going to uncover. What if someone does the exact opposite of gaslighting? What if instead of breaking you down, they make you feel like the absolute most special, brilliant, and loved person in the entire world, only to use that intoxicating feeling as a weapon against you later? Think about that for a bit. We're going to decode the hidden under-the-hood mechanics of emotional manipulation. And look, this isn't about pointing fingers, right? It's about understanding the actual architecture of how these subtle mind tricks work in everyday relationships. And more importantly, how you can spot them before they take hold. Okay, let's dive into this. The goal here is simple. Learn to recognize and protect yourself from 3 very specific, very powerful psychological traps. By understanding exactly how these tactics work neurologically and emotionally, you can learn to lock down your boundaries. We're going to break down the clinical mechanics behind these behaviors so you can see them coming from a mile away. Trick 1. The love bombing illusion. So I want you to imagine a scenario. You meet someone and they just seem perfect. Right out of the gate, they're constantly complimenting you, texting you all day long, making you feel like the absolute center of the universe. You might hear things like, "I've never met anyone like you," or "You're exactly what I've been looking for." And hearing that, wow, it feels amazing, doesn't it? It's literally like a movie script. But a word of caution here. While it's a fantastic feeling, when it happens this fast and this intensely, it's often a little too good to be true. This is what we call love bombing. It's overwhelming someone with excessive attention, affection, gifts, or praise. But pay close attention to the kicker here. The real goal is to quickly build emotional dependence. It isn't just about being nice. It's an accelerated process designed to lock you in and make you rely on them emotionally in record time. Now, what's really interesting about this is the actual brain science behind why it works so flawlessly. See, our brains naturally crave positive attention. When someone makes us feel that valued, the brain releases a flood of chemicals linked directly to reward and connection. It literally feels like a high. So when that intense attention is suddenly withdrawn, your brain goes into a state of panic, wanting it back. You end up working harder and harder just to chase that initial rush of affection. The absolutely crucial point here is understanding the difference between genuine excitement and manipulation. Look, not every enthusiastic person is out to get you. Genuine excitement in a new connection is completely normal. The red flag pops up when that intense attention is used as a tool to gain control. They build this massive emotional connection and then flip. They suddenly become distant, controlling, or demanding. That sudden flip is the absolute hallmark of manipulation. So, how do you protect yourself? The defense is pretty simple but profound. Trust consistency over intensity. Real trust is built slowly. It takes time. You really have to ask yourself, do this person's actions stay respectful over the long haul? Healthy relationships grow gradually, whereas manipulation moves at warp speed to lock you in before you can even think critically. Trick 2. The weaponization of guilt. While some people use excessive kindness as a weapon, others take a totally different route to get their way. Instead of showering you with praise, they make you feel incredibly guilty until you do exactly what they want. Have you ever heard phrases like, if you really cared about me, or after everything I've done for you, or maybe the classic, I guess I'll just do it myself? Now, context matters, for sure. Sometimes people say these things because they're genuinely hurt, but it becomes a serious trap when these phrases are weaponized. This is classic guilt tripping. It's repeatedly using emotional statements to pressure someone into doing something against their wishes. And notice that word, repeatedly. The manipulator's goal isn't to logically solve a problem you're having, not at all. Their goal is entirely to influence your emotions. They just want to make you feel guilty enough that you throw in the towel and give in to their demands. Let's see how this builds into what psychologists call the guilt cycle. Step 1. Most of us have a natural desire to be kind, right? We hate disappointing people. Step 2. The manipulator spots this and applies targeted emotional pressure. They exploit that kindness, which inevitably leads to step 3. You find yourself saying yes to things when every fiber of your being is screaming to say no. The best way to spot this happening in real time is by looking at the fundamental difference in intent. In a healthy dynamic, you have a logical argument where the goal is to actually solve the problem together. But with a guilt trip, logic is thrown completely out the window. It's replaced by emotional influence, where the sole objective is leveraging your negative feelings to force your compliance. Here's your defense against the guilt trip. You really need to internalize this. Feeling guilty does not automatically mean you've done something wrong. Take a pause and ask yourself, am I helping right now because I truly want to, or because I feel emotionally pressured? Remember, healthy relationships respect boundaries. Manipulation completely ignores them. Trick 3. The power of silence. Okay, so we've covered excessive affection and we've covered loud guilt. But what about when a person doesn't argue at all? Sometimes the absolute most manipulative thing a person can do is say nothing. Imagine you're trying to resolve a disagreement. You send a message. No reply. You call. No answer. You start apologizing even though you aren't even sure what you did wrong in the first place. But still, you just hit this absolute wall of silence. This is the infamous silent treatment. It's defined as disappearing without explanation repeatedly in order to control another person's emotions or behavior. It is not about taking a breather. It's a calculated disappearance designed specifically to leave you scrambling in the dark. And this brilliantly illustrates why this tactic is just so devastating. We are highly social beings. Research actually shows that social rejection activates many of the exact same brain regions involved in physical pain. It literally physically hurts. Plus, silence creates this deep anxiety-inducing uncertainty, which our brains absolutely despise. It forces you to try and repair the relationship, even if you weren't the one at fault to begin with. Once again, we have to distinguish between healthy and unhealthy behavior here. It is perfectly healthy to take time to calm down. A healthy partner or friend will say, look, I'm upset right now, I need some time, but we'll talk tomorrow. That's setting a healthy boundary. That is entirely different from just vanishing into thin air specifically to punish or pressure someone. Your defense here is all about establishing communication standards. Absolutely respect healthy requests for space, but don't confuse endless, punishing silence with healthy communication. A respectful relationship allows difficult conversations to actually happen. Ignoring someone forever rarely solves an issue. It just kicks the can down a very, very painful road. The next hidden threat. So throughout this explainer, we've decoded 3 powerful tactics from the manipulator's playbook: the rapid-fire affection of love bombing, the crushing weight of guilt tripping, and the painful isolation of the silent treatment. But I need to warn you about something that's even harder to recognize, because instead of acting powerful or demanding or distant, what happens when the manipulator appears completely helpless? When they play the ultimate victim, it bypasses all of our normal defenses, and that is exactly what makes it so incredibly effective. Have you made a decision today that wasn't entirely your own? I mean, really think about it for a sec. From the specific coffee you bought this morning to the way you handled a slightly awkward conversation, invisible forces are constantly shaping our choices. Today we're opening up our field guide to human psychology to uncover exactly how these psychological tactics of influence actually work. On our agenda for this explainer, we're going to decode 3 distinct mind tricks: playing the victim, social proof, and reciprocity. All right, let's jump right into mind trick number 5, playing the victim. My goal today is to help you protect yourself from these incredibly subtle manipulations, while, making sure you still maintain your natural empathy and healthy relationships. So we're going to focus on what happens when a totally normal, healthy confrontation is suddenly flipped completely upside down. I want you to literally put yourself in the driver's seat of this scenario. Imagine you're confronting someone after they've clearly hurt you or made a mistake. You walk up to them expecting a mature conversation and, frankly, an apology. But then the script flips. Suddenly, they become the one who desperately needs your sympathy. Instead of getting that apology, you somehow find yourself comforting the very person who caused the problem in the first place. It usually sounds a little something like this. Well, everyone always blames me. Or, you have absolutely no idea how difficult my life is. Or even, I'm the one who's suffering here. And just like that, within minutes, the entire direction of the conversation just derails. Instead of actually discussing their behavior or the boundary they crossed, it's like all the oxygen in the room is just sucked up by their emotional distress. These are incredibly specific, highly manipulative phrases designed to completely disarm you. Notice the key word here in this definition: consistently. Playing the victim is all about consistently avoiding responsibility by shifting all attention to one's own suffering just to escape accountability. Now, I want to be perfectly clear here. Not everyone who shares their struggles is manipulating you, right? People genuinely go through really difficult things. The difference between a genuine struggle and a manipulation tactic is the pattern. This tactic works so ridiculously well because it exploits our natural, beautiful human instinct to feel empathy. When someone appears hurt, our biological instinct is to rush in and help. Manipulative people literally weaponize that exact instinct to redirect attention away from their own actions. But here is our ultimate defense strategy. You absolutely do not have to turn off your heart to protect yourself. You can reassure your natural, healthy instinct for empathy, which is caring about someone's feelings, while still holding them strictly to accountability, which is solving the original issue. Empathy and accountability can, and honestly absolutely must, exist together in a healthy dynamic. So the next time you're in a tough conversation and it somehow magically becomes entirely about the other person's pain, I want you to use the pause technique. Just slow down, take a deep breath, and ask yourself this one crucial question: are we solving the original issue? If the answer is no, it's time to gently, but very firmly, steer that conversation right back on track. Okay, moving right along. Mind trick number 6, social proof. So while that first trick relied on intense, one-on-one emotional manipulation, this next one explores how some people, and especially companies, influence you without saying much at all. They just let the crowd do the heavy lifting. Imagine walking down a street in a brand new city, and you walk past these 2 places. One is a completely empty restaurant. The other, it's got a huge, long line forming outside the door. Which one are you going to choose? Well, if you're like most of us, you're going to pick the busy one for sure. Our brains take a very quick, super efficient shortcut and simply assume that if a crowd is there, the crowd must be right. The busy place just has to have the better food, right? And that brings us to the textbook definition of social proof, a mental shortcut where we assume that if everyone else is doing it, it must be the right choice. See, our brains evolved in groups to increase our chances of survival. Thousands of years ago, if you saw a group of people sprinting away from a cave, you didn't exactly stop to investigate, you ran too. Following the group literally meant staying alive. Today, that deeply ingrained survival instinct is completely hardwired into how we form our opinions and make our buying decisions. So, the crucial point here is that this survival instinct is incredibly easy to exploit. I mean, you see these phrases absolutely everywhere. This product has sold 1 million copies. Everyone is talking about this. Thousands of people can't be wrong. Popularity is constantly being used as a metric to influence your behavior. The trick here is that high numbers create this illusion of quality, even when they don't actually prove that the product, service, or idea is genuinely good for you. The absolute best way to protect your autonomy here is to insert a little friction into your decision-making process. Before you just blindly follow the crowd, hit pause and ask yourself this question: am I choosing this because it's genuinely good or simply because everyone else seems to like it? Remind yourself that popularity isn't always the same as truth. I mean, sometimes a long line literally just means a really slow kitchen.
All right, let's get into mind trick number 7, reciprocity.
Now, this is a trick you have absolutely experienced, probably without even noticing it was happening at the time. And the wildest part? It almost always starts with something completely 100% free. The trap is basically set in 3 steps over time. Step 1, you receive a small, unexpected gift or favor. Maybe someone buys you a coffee or helps you out with a tiny little task at work. Step 2, almost immediately, this uncomfortable sense of obligation sets in. You feel this weird ticking clock to return the favor. And then, step 3, the trap snapshot. The person makes a demand for a much, much bigger request. Because of that lingering obligation, you find it incredibly hard to say no, even if you really, really want to.
This whole thing leverages the principle of reciprocity, which is the natural human instinct to repay kindness because we inherently value fairness and cooperation. Much like empathy and group survival, wanting to repay kindness is a wonderful, super healthy instinct. It is literally the glue that helps society function and builds trust between us. But manipulators know exactly how to weaponize this deep-seated desire for fairness. They intentionally use small favors as leverage to create a manufactured sense of debt.
It is absolutely vital to know the difference between these two concepts. Healthy generosity comes entirely without hidden expectations. It's a gift freely given. End of story. Manipulation, on the other hand, intentionally creates an obligation specifically to demand a disproportionate repayment later. If a gift feels like a transaction where you didn't actually agree to the terms, well, it's not a gift, it's a trap.
I want to deliver this empowering takeaway directly to you, so listen closely. You are allowed to appreciate someone's kindness without feeling pressured to repay them. If someone does something small for you and then immediately pivots to asking for your time, your money, or for you to just drop your personal boundaries, you can simply say, "Hey, thank you so much for the coffee," and still firmly say no to their request. Healthy generosity does not demand repayment. Wow, okay, we've now successfully decoded 7 powerful psychological tactics throughout this guide, including the 3 we tackled today. But our source material promises that there are 3 more incredibly fascinating, completely invisible tactics left to uncover, right along with more practical everyday strategies to protect yourself while building trusting relationships. But before I let you go, I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on. Looking back at your decisions today, the arguments you maybe conceded, the things you bought, the favors you agreed to, which ones were truly your own, and which ones were influenced by a subtle trick of psychology? Keep your eyes peeled, stay curious, and I'll see you. Okay, so have you ever caught yourself buying something you didn't even actually need just because there was a little countdown timer ticking away on the screen? Yeah, me too. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the architect of choice, mastering psychological influence. We are going to expose the everyday psychological illusions that are, well, literally silently guiding our daily choices. And more importantly, we're going to talk about how to build up your defenses against them. Here's our quick roadmap for today. We're looking at decoding your daily decisions, the trap of urgent fear, the halo effect illusion, confidence does not equal competence, and finally, your ultimate psychological defense. Let's get right into it. Section 1, decoding your daily decisions and the automatic shortcuts your brain takes. All right, picture this. You're just scrolling online, or maybe walking through a store, and bam, you see those classic red letters, only 2 left, or offer ends in 10 minutes. Right away, what happens? Your heart rate kind of ticks up. Maybe your palms get a little sweaty. You suddenly feel this intense pressure to decide right this second. And honestly, we are all super susceptible to this kind of emotional hijacking, and it completely bypasses our normal, logical thinking process. Which brings us to Section 2, the trap of urgent fear, and why panic overrides logic. So when we think we're going to miss out on an opportunity, our brains just shift gears. We totally ditch logic and go straight into emotional reaction mode. The cold hard science behind this, it's called loss aversion. Basically, it's the proven tendency for us to feel the pain of losing something way more intensely than we feel the pleasure of gaining something equal. Think about it. Losing a $20 bill ruins your whole afternoon, right? But finding $20, it's nice, but it doesn't impact you nearly as much. That fear of missing out, that potential loss, is so painful to our brains that it literally forces us into making rapid emotional choices. And urgency, it weaponizes that exact fear. So how on earth do we defend against this? Look, whenever a salesperson or a website is pressuring you to make an immediate choice, I want you to just hit the mental pause button. Seriously, just stop. Take a deep breath and ask yourself this one specific question. Would I still make this decision tomorrow?
It's all about the difference between illusion and reality. When you act immediately out of fear because of some manufactured deadline, you are making a purely emotional decision. But if you just let a little time pass, say wait until tomorrow to decide, logic actually gets a chance to take the wheel. If your answer about buying that thing changes after sleeping on it for 24 hours, well, congratulations, you just successfully dodged the trap.
Moving on to Section 3, the halo effect illusion. Judging a book by its very polished cover. Let's set another scene. You meet someone totally new. They are impeccably dressed, they carry themselves with absolute confidence, and they speak super clearly. Honestly, before they even finish their very first sentence, your brain is already taking a massive mental shortcut. Without you even realizing it, your brain assumes, hey, they have all these polished traits, so they must also be incredibly intelligent, completely honest, and totally trustworthy. This mental shortcut actually has a name. It's called the halo effect. It's when just one positive quality creates this overarching positive impression, which causes mere appearances to completely outweigh actual evidence. Now, to be fair, this isn't inherently manipulative on its own. Usually, it's just our brain trying to save some processing power. But manipulators absolutely exploit this. They intentionally craft a highly polished image because they know firsthand that first impressions heavily influence how we perceive their actual character. So to break this halo, you really need a reality check. When you find yourself instantly trusting a super polished presentation, just pause. Ask yourself, wait, what evidence do I actually have? You really have to look past the tailored suit or that perfectly smooth intro. You got to ask yourself, are you relying on just a first impression, which is usually based on one flashy positive trait? Or are you looking at actual evidence, the footprints of their actions observed over a period of time? Appearance is just not reality. We have to judge people by their consistent behavior, not just by how smoothly they say hello.
All right, Section 4, confidence does not equal competence and the danger of absolute certainty. Okay, imagine two people are asked the exact same complex question. Person A pauses, thinks about it, and says, I think this might be correct. But person B immediately steps up and boldly declares, I am absolutely certain. Who do you automatically trust? Human nature pretty much guarantees we gravitate toward that second person. We are literally magnetically drawn to certainty. But guys, here's the huge danger in that. Sounding confident with a megaphone doesn't actually mean you're right. Someone can be incredibly assertive and still be completely 100% wrong. On the flip side, the person speaking carefully, kind of examining the puzzle pieces, they often hold the true expertise because they actually understand the deep complexity of the topic at hand. And research backs this up. We routinely and dangerously confuse absolute certainty with actual competence. To protect yourself from this confidence bias, you gotta shift your focus entirely. Stop asking yourself, wow, how confident do they sound? And start asking, okay, but what real evidence supports what they're actually saying? This is your final protective mechanism against these specific mind tricks. Because the crucial takeaway here is this. Confidence is exactly like a magnet, right? It attracts attention. And look, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being an engaging, confident speaker. But only verifiable evidence should act as the lock that secures your actual trust. So let the confident delivery grab your focus, absolutely. But demand the hard facts before you actually hand over your trust. Which leads us to Section 5, your ultimate psychological defense, turning self-awareness into armor. First off, let's just set some ground rules as you take all this new knowledge out into the real world. Not everyone is manipulative. Most people out there really aren't trying to trick you. The main goal of this explainer is simply to help you recognize unhealthy patterns. Because when you truly understand your own mind, you naturally prevent unfair influence, and you end up making thoughtful, deliberate decisions instead of just reactive ones. I absolutely love this quote directly from the source material, and it's basically the perfect thesis for everything we've covered today. Real psychological strength isn't controlling other people, it's understanding yourself. That is so true. The more deeply you know how your own mind works, how it rushes toward fear, how it automatically hands out trust because of a nice suit, or how it just completely craves absolute certainty, the harder it becomes for anyone to unfairly influence you. And that wraps up our deep dive into the architecture of choice. I want to leave you with one final kind of provocative question to chew on today. Which of these psychological tactics surprised you the most? Was it the raw power of urgent fear? The sneaky nature of the halo effect? Or maybe our blind trust in loud confidence? Take a second to reflect on that and start noticing these tricks out in the wild. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay focused and keep learning.